Perfect. Dr. Robin Gaster, you are the president of Incometrics, a data and program evaluation consultancy. You are also a visiting scholar at George Washington University and a nationally recognized expert on innovation and small businesses. And today we are here to talk about your first book, Behemoth, Amazon Rising, Power and Seduction in the Age of Amazon. Dr. Gaster, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm happy to be here.
So, Dr. Gaster, I went to your bio and it's just a scroll page after page after page.
I'm sorry.
So,
I have a short one. I should just put that up there.
So it's quite interesting. Perhaps the only thing that you and I have in common is that at one time you were an illegal or pirate cabbie, and me, I was an Uber driver for a little bit. So we have that thing in common.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm not sure which of us had it better. Me doing it 40 years ago, or you doing it recently.
Okay, we will find out. I wonder, of course, I'm not going to ask you about every detail of your biography because that would be about an hour podcast, but can you just give us the highlights? You were born in England, and then how did you ended up where you are today?
Yeah, so I was born in England, and I went to college in England, and then in the late 1970s, I had an opportunity to come to America to do a PhD. And so that's what I did. And I arrived in Berkeley, and it was a massive culture shock to move from London to Berkeley, I can tell you. For the first 6 months, I sort of rushed outside every day and lay down in the sun until I realized that it was always there. You know, so it was a culture shock. So I did my PhD there. And then I got a job teaching at the University of Virginia, which lasted a couple of years. I'm not really an academic. I'm too impatient, and my interests are too wide. And that's not to say academics are bad. It's just a bad fit for me. I wasn't a good fit for them. Then I had a very strange job working as an editor in the boardroom of the International Monetary Fund. And that is a really strange place, and we could spend time on that too. After that, I had a congressional fellowship at the Office of Technology Assessment. This was at the time that the common market was forming in around 1992. And not the common market was forming, but the single market was forming. And I was working on the impact of the single market. So I did that for a little bit. And then I decided that I'd had enough of large organizations, and I formed my own consulting company. And that has been what I've been doing for the last 30 years or so. And I definitely don't regret it. I think from my perspective, the overhead of working in large organizations is simply too severe. I don't have the patience for it. Some people love it. It's not for me. So you know, I find interesting projects and explore things that seem of importance to me at the time. And somehow I get funded to do that, and I produce things that people seem to like. So, you know, why not?
Okay, you mentioned that people were surprised when you got admitted into Oxford. Were you a mediocre student, or were you just lucky?
I was a terrible student.
Who did you bribe to get in?
I didn't. I put in, you know, in England, as in much of Europe, still high stakes exams matter a lot. It's much more so than the SAT or the ACT in the US. They really matter. And basically, I worked really, really hard for about 8 weeks. And that was enough to do well in my exams, which suggests that the previous 4 years was not really necessary. You know, so I could have been doing something more productive perhaps. But so I did get into Oxford. It was a shock to my high school, I must say. They were not prepared for that at all.
This is off topic, but before we get to
Yeah.
the book, I noticed a Canadian flag right behind your
Oh, yes,
shoulder.
yes.
What's the connection? You love Canada?
No, it's my son, who is just finishing up a master's degree at the University of British Columbia, where he also went for his undergrad. So I've been there a few times and picked up a few Canadian knickknacks, and I'm working on the accent, but it's hard.
We love foreigners right here in Canada.
Yeah,
We're
yeah, yeah.
open to immigration.
Well, I would imagine that you're going to get a lot more. At least you have a fairly sane country, so.
Okay, so let's see. How do you get into the topic of Amazon? I know that Amazon is everywhere in our life. It's just
Yeah.
as prevalent as electricity, but there must have been something that piqued your curiosity.
Yeah, I wrote a previous book which I didn't publish because I wasn't satisfied with it. It was a book about the gig economy, actually,
Mhm.
and looking at Uber and what to do about that. But I didn't really feel that it was what I like. I didn't like it. But towards the end of it, I started getting interested in Amazon's logistics system because I've been looking at Uber and looking at all these kind of cobbled together platforms. And Uber is both a logistics company and a platform company. And from there, it was a fairly direct shot over to Amazon. And I use Amazon. I like Amazon. I have lots of Amazon products. So I became more and more fascinated by this, what I think is a really extraordinary and unique company. I think they're not like anybody else. And so gradually I got interested. I thought, well, maybe I'll write about that, and so I started writing, and then I realized how hard it was going to be. And here we are a couple of years later.
I'm just gonna share 1 minute story about my relationship with Amazon.
Uh-huh.
I resisted for a long time. I saw that everyone was using it and I just resisted it until one day that I needed ink for my printer. So
Right.
I went to all my regular retailers here for 2 days. I couldn't find the printer, I mean the ink, and I broke down. I went to Amazon, I ordered it, and the next day it was at my doorstep. So I said, oh, screw this. I had to succumb to the pressure. And since then I always try to encourage my local businesses,
Yeah, absolutely.
but I know that worst case scenario, Amazon is always there. So it gives me like an insurance that as a consumer, I'm always gonna be taken care of.
Well, and the reality is that no local business can um, come remotely close to matching the selection that you find on Amazon. A Walmart carries about 100,000 items, different items. And the last time anybody counted in 2016, Amazon itself, not counting its marketplace, was carrying 12 million items. So you know, and on the catalog you can find 350 million items.
Oh my God.
So that if you want that left-handed widget wrench, there's only one place you're going to find
Mm,
it.
mm. Yeah. Okay. So before we get much farther,
Sure.
I don't think there is a listener who doesn't know who Amazon is. But can you just, as you summarize it in your first part of the book, where does Amazon come from?
Amazon come Amazon started in 1995 as a tiny online bookstore, and it was a very simple, easy to understand business. They took orders over the website, and somebody ordered a book. They would send an email to the distributors of the books. They didn't have their own distribution. They just called up Taylor and Baker, or one of the other distributors. There are only two. And a book would show up by mail a little later, and then Amazon would package it up again and send it on to the customer. And this was great because for people who couldn't get to bookstores and who had other reasons for looking at Amazon, especially looking for hard to find books and so forth. So they started there, and grew very, very quickly. Then they got into toys, which are kind of similar to books in that they're pretty standardized products. It's not like they get to be personalized very much, and they're mostly quite lightweight, easy to ship. So they got into toys, and then they got into electronics, which have some of the same characteristics. Most of them, not TVs, but little electronics are easy to ship. And they were doing this so well that that both Borders and Toys R Us, the dominant chains in books and toys, started using Amazon as their online front end. And as we all know, that didn't end happily for them. Both of them went bankrupt. And Amazon. So at the time, Amazon. This is in the early 2000s. Amazon starts to innovate in different ways, in important ways. They invented the one-click shopping application, which became incredibly important. You just go to Amazon and you click to buy. You don't even think about putting your information in or telling them where to ship or anything like that. It's all frictionless. There's no friction there. In fact, it's greased. So Amazon invented that. They invented something even more important, which is Amazon Prime. Amazon Prime, I think, is the super glue that glues customers to Amazon. Because once you've invested $120 or so in your Prime service, every time you use Amazon, it's like a dividend, right? You pay up front, but you get free shipping for the year. So the more you use, the cheaper the whole project becomes. And Amazon then realized around 2010 that it could do something else, that it could start to offer its Prime members special benefits. So they did Prime Day, which is a special sale for Prime members. It's the biggest sale event of the year. And they started offering entertainment. I don't know if you watch Amazon Prime Video, but I do sometimes. It's free, right? Wow. And it's competitive with Netflix, which itself costs $120 a year, right? And if you think about what that is, so Netflix is competing with Hulu and everybody else to provide the best online streaming service. Well, that's great. And it looks as though Amazon Video is doing that too, except they're not. That's not the business they're in. Their business is attracting Prime customers and keeping them happy. Somewhere Bezos said something to the event that we are the only company that figured out how to turn Golden Globes into shoes.
Okay, well, you have been saying Amazon, but in reality, this is code name for Jeff Bezos. It's almost like Clark Kent and Superman. It's just.
Oh, I hate this. It's so true, but I hate it. I really hate the great man theory of history. That it's great men striding across history who change everything. I think this is mostly baloney. If you read Nassim Taleb's great book, The Black Swan, he points out that somebody has to do it.
Right.
Somebody has to be the leader, and some of them step up, and of course they make a difference. I'm not denying that, but to explain history like that is a mistake. However, Amazon has Bezos' stamp all over it in both good and bad ways. And so his departure will be interesting. He's handpicked somebody who's been basically his shadow for 20 years. Andy Jassy started at Amazon as Bezos' shadow. I mean, he followed him around for a year to be his kind of gopher and to learn the business and to understand. So I don't think we're going to see big changes. But maybe some of the obsessive quality of Amazon will soften a little bit because I think Bezos is obviously obsessive in certain ways. I mean, his whole mantra is we are customer obsessed. And when we hear that as customers, we hear the customer part, and that sounds great. And I'm all for companies that, you know, really want to do well by their customers. There's so few of them, right? I mean, in reality,
That's so
most of them
sad.
would most of them would chuck you overboard in a second for about $10. But you know, so they do that. But there is the obsessive side too. I mean, obsession itself is problematic, and there's a sort of moral problem at the heart of Amazon. I mean, if what you do is create an entity whose mission is to worship customers, that's pretty unbalanced. It's pretty, you know, I mean, you drove for Uber, you know what that looks like, right? If you privilege the customer and you don't much care about the provider, that's what it looks like.
Wow.
And Amazon is too big now. You know, it was okay when they were a little bookstore, they could be as obsessive as they like. I wouldn't care. But they have 1.2 million employees.
Wow.
They have 400,000 drivers. They picked them up in the last 2 years. They brought 200,000 people on board last year. I mean, just, you know, think about that for a second, what it takes to hire somebody, right? And they managed to hire 200,000 people. And they've managed to simplify the work in those warehouses so they can bring people on efficiently, hundreds of thousands of people on efficiently to work for 6 weeks in the holiday season, right? So the work itself has become so simplified and de-skilled. That's the only way to do it. You can't do it otherwise. So this is not a future I want to encourage. What I want, basically, I want the Amazon I want, not the Amazon I got.
Okay. Okay. I'm gonna come to this in a second.
Yeah.
I'm trying to become a better storyteller. One thing that I had to say about Jeff Bezos is that he convinced shareholders during many years, I think a decade, to accept not profit, to say, we're going to be okay. I'm not going to give you any profits this year, nor the next, nor the following. Can you share some of your insights about Jeff Bezos' storytelling abilities? Is this the man for the myth, or
the biggest, you know, the biggest part of his storytelling ability is that he didn't give a shit about Wall Street, and the reason for that was because he owned enough stock not to have to care about a takeover. And as Amazon got bigger, his position actually improved, because you know that Wall Street is increasingly dominated by passive investment funds like Vanguard and BlackRock and whatever. And as Amazon got bigger, they had to buy more of it because it became a more important part of the overall stock market. And now Bezos and his wife, last time I looked, I must admit this a little while ago, Bezos and his wife own 17% of Amazon, which is a lot for a founder. Most founders end up with a few percent after several rounds of funding. And the next 4 biggest shareholders are all passive investment funds. They're not going to pressure him to do anything. Their job is just to ride along. They don't care. They fundamentally don't care about any individual company. It's not their approach. So, you know, the pressure is only there for him to the extent that he cares about Wall Street. And he has demonstrated as early as his 1997 shareholder letter, where he just said, we're in this for the long haul. If you don't want to be in it, don't buy our stock. We're okay with that. And he also did something very smart in 1999. He went to the market early, before the dot-com crash, and he took equity, and he took on a sizable bond issue. And that was enough to ride them out through the bad times and through the low profits. And, you know, the other thing to say is, if you look carefully, it's not really low profits. It's just high investment. You know, they're putting a lot of, during those 20 years where there were no profits, or 17 years where basically no profits, they built their logistics system. they built something better than FedEx, right?
Yeah.
It takes a lot of money and a lot of time, and now they own it.
Wow. Okay. I want to come back to the Amazon that you want, but I would like to just touch on the healthcare. They have been
Mm,
saying that they may get into this industry. Of course, all the companies in the healthcare industry are terrified,
yeah,
but the healthcare industry in the United States has been horrendous. Uh, is practically the worst among industrialized countries, the most
yeah.
inefficient, the more expensive. Wouldn't it be good if someone like Amazon just came and say, okay, we are going to develop some efficiencies in this system, because actually it's practically not benefiting anyone other than, I don't know, attorneys and politicians. I
I
don't know
would
who
be
exactly
so
is.
so I guess what I would say is several things about this. First, I think it's a mistake to say that the healthcare system doesn't benefit anybody. The
Mhm.
American healthcare system is really good for people who have good insurance,
Mm,
right? And that's actually like half of Americans.
I see.
So it's not that it's a terrible system, it's that it's terrible for a lot of people. It fails a lot of people very badly. So the fact that the US has terrible infant mortality for such a rich country, well, it's because the bottom third of the population have really crappy healthcare. So it's not universal. So that's the first thing. So the problem is that, as Obama found, there are lots of people who like their healthcare. They like their doctors. They bitch about how much it costs. But for them, for most, again, a majority, um, their employer pays most of the cost. So they don't see it. They don't see the cost, and they see the benefits, and they're cautious about change. So where Amazon is going, I think, is quite interesting. There seem to be three areas that they're really getting ready to push. One is, I do think that they're going to push into drug distribution using their logistics system. PillPack was just a start, and they'll be doing more of that. So that's one. Second, it seems pretty clear that healthcare and wellness is going to be a big focus for Alexa. They haven't found a really good use case. They put a lot of money in. There are a lot of Alexa devices, more than 100 million out there
Wow.
in the US. But, aside from asking about the weather and, what's on TV, people haven't found a real strong use case. People aren't using it for shopping much. It's not a very good interface for that. So wellness is clearly going to be a focus. So that's two. But the point you really started with is their Amazon Care primary care. They are clearly experimenting with their workforce. They're putting clinics into the warehouses, for example. They're looking at just going straight to high-end care for tough conditions, for cancer and stuff. They have a deal with one of the Los Angeles hospitals to fly all their people there who have certain kinds of, and the reason they do that is they think they'll get there anyway, that it will eventually, the cancer case will escalate through the system and it will eventually end up in Los Angeles anyway. And they think this may be a way to get better outcomes and less cost. So would I be, I think Amazon is customer obsessed. Healthcare is absolutely not customer obsessed. It's horrendously not customer obsessed. So would I want to, fortunately I'm old enough to be on Medicare, but if I wasn't and Amazon called me and said, hey, we got this new Amazon Care system, I'd be pretty interested.
Wow. Okay. Can you now tell us the Amazon that you would like to see, the one that makes sense for society, that is not monopolizing and killing every small business in my neighborhood?
Yeah. You know, the small businesses, uh, It's going to be hard to be a small business if you're selling the same products as Amazon. And if it's not Amazon, it's going to be someone else. I mean, Bezos is fond of saying that Amazon didn't kill the bookstores, the internet killed the bookstores. And that if it wasn't Amazon, it would have been someone else. I think the bookstores are actually a pretty interesting case. You know, they can't compete with Amazon directly on price or on selection, or in many cases on speed. I mean, you know, you can get a book from Amazon instantly on your Kindle. Can't do that from a bookstore. So yeah, small bookstores are flourishing in the United States. So how is that? The answer is that they've turned themselves, they focused on the things that they do really well, which is connecting to their local community. So if you can find a way to not be trying to sell commodity products at a commodity price, you have a chance. Amazon is not interested really beyond that. You know, that's their sweet spot. They sell mass products. So you have to find ways to, so I did an interview with somebody recently. I interviewed someone who's building an online platform for construction parts, you know, for bulldozers and stuff like that. And his advantage is that he knows that industry backwards. He knows all the equipment. He can tell the customer exactly which kind of teeth go in which kind of model of bulldozer, and Amazon can't do that yet. So Amazon has too many returns, they cost a lot of money, and I think this platform is going to be successful because of specialized knowledge. Amazon is so big that they cannot address niche products well. Can you compete with them head on? I think that's pretty difficult. So the Amazon I want, I would like an Amazon that is as obsessed about its producers as it is about its customers. Mm. And I don't think this is impossible. I mean, you know, the model of sort of, if not benevolent capitalism, at least social democratic capitalism has been around for 70, 80 years now, since after World War II. And there's no reason why we cannot push Amazon and encourage it and force it in some cases to basically do the right thing by its workers and its partners. You know, Amazon is like this sort of obsessive guy who has only one thing in mind, and he's digging a trench up the street. He doesn't care about anything else, the traffic, the people, where the rocks land, nothing. He's just digging his trench. And Amazon is too big for that. Wow. You know, it's, the behavior is just, it just needs to change, and it will not change internally. So wow. If it's not going to change, then look, we spent 100 years from 1840 into the 1940s to get an agreement about what is acceptable in the workplace, right? No child labor, no mandatory overtime, you get limits on hours, you get this kind of pay, minimum pay, benefits, et cetera, et cetera. We took 100 years of struggle to get there. And now we have a new challenge to the productive side of the economy, which is digitization and the sort of ruthless exploitation of every asymmetry and flaw in the legislation that currently exists, right? Anything that can be exploited will be exploited in the current world. And I just think Amazon is a good test case. They're a very successful company. They do fantastic things. I mean, I think what Amazon has done in terms of making my personal life better, fantastic. But I don't want that taste in my mouth from what I know is going on over there. I just don't. I don't see why we should. They're rich. They can afford it.
What do you think of consumer revolt? Like my case, I haven't succumbed to become an Amazon Prime, and I really go out of my way to if I can afford in any way not to shop in Amazon. I mean I'm only shop there when I'm against the corner. So that's one
So,
thing. Yes,
so,
go ahead.
so there are 125 million households in the United States, and Amazon Prime has 112 million members as of a year ago. It's probably more than that now. They have more members than fill out the census form, right? So that people are more prepared to give their information to Amazon than they are to the US Census, where they're legally required to give that information. So, I mean, I would love to say that a consumer boycott would work. Um, I, I can't see it, and I can't see a competitor emerging. You know, I don't. I mean, it's not exactly as though Walmart does all that much better by its workers, right? I mean, it's Walmart pays less, uses more part-timers. I mean, is it better? Well, I don't know. Probably not. So, do I think no? I don't think that's going to work, and I don't think antitrust will work either. I think antitrust is kind of a 19th century solution. You know, it requires that companies not change very much. You know, so that you see something wrong, you go through this process, you get millions of pages of documents, you read through them, you say, aha, you did this wrong, and we're gonna make you do something else. And this takes like 8 years with a big company. Well, 8 years from now, I have no idea what Amazon is going to be, but it isn't going to be what it is now. And so I think that kind of old-fashioned model is not going to work. We need new models that allow us to monitor and address the behavior of big companies in real time. They have to give up their information in real time so that we have a chance to fix what's going on before it's all too late.
Wow. Here in Canada, people are saying that companies like Shopify could present a challenge to Amazon. I mean, I'm shaking my head as well as you are, but I wonder
No,
what's
I
your
think,
opinion.
I mean, so Shopify does something really well. What it does is it provides a storefront, right? And it most importantly, it doesn't control the customer. Amazon will not let its sellers communicate with their own customers. It is ruthless. Shopify is not like that. It's more like a service that, as a merchant, you hire them. They do the e-commerce part of the piece for you. But two things, two out of the three things they don't have. One is customers. There are no Shopify customers. There are just customers for whatever store you have. It's difficult to compete against Amazon's scale. So that's one thing. And how do you get new customers? Ooh, it's hard and expensive. Amazon will do it for you if you sit on their platform. So that's one thing. And then there's delivery, right? So now what Amazon is doing is essentially accelerating delivery to the point that Shopify is not competitive.
Wow.
Right? Shopify has to use FedEx, but FedEx can't deliver a pack of batteries overnight for free. They would cost it would cost you $30 to do that, right? So if you don't have, I can understand why Shopify is growing fast and why merchants like it for their existing business. As it transitions online, Shopify is great, right? It's taking their existing business and it's providing a pretty seamless transition to online. But it doesn't solve the customer acquisition problem, and it doesn't solve the logistics problem. So is it a real competitor? Yeah, it's a competitor, but it's a big pie. It's growing fast, and it doesn't provide an alternative for all the millions of sellers who have gravitated to Amazon, the small sellers and medium-sized sellers who are not in bricks and mortar. Shopify is a great solution for bricks and mortar companies who want to not get completely run over.
Wow.
But it's not for digital first companies. They don't
Well,
need it.
this is a big, this is a huge topic to
Yeah.
talk about. You make my brain almost explode. I just have one more question. Now that Jeff Bezos is no longer the CEO, you think he would just take his money and play with rockets with Elon Musk, and what's he's
No,
gonna be doing?
he's become chairman, right? So all that means is that he doesn't have to deal with day-to-day operations anymore. And he didn't want to do that anyway. I mean, he's been retreating from that. He came back during the COVID crisis because it was a crisis. But previous to that, he had been retreating. So, he's there to provide strategic direction and help with big decisions. I don't think that will change. I think competing with Elon Musk will be fine and fun. And, now he's getting into philanthropy, and he's suddenly woken up to the fact that there's a climate problem. I mean, that was he gave $10 billion to climate companies this year. Okay, it's a pretty large number. I think it's about 10 times what each of them had actually ever received from a large donor. And he did it for many of them, as has his wife. So philanthropy can become a pretty big deal. Look at Bill Gates. So how involved he stays in Amazon is just not clear, but I kind of doubt that he's going completely away. It's his baby. I mean,
Wow. Wow.
would you leave it behind, completely behind? I can't see it really. Can you?
Well, Bill Gates did in a way. I mean, not
That's true.
completely,
That
but
is true. That's true. But he doesn't seem like the same kind of person.
right, right. Okay, well, the last question, please tell us one more time the title of your book and where people can buy it and follow you as well.
Sure. So the title of the book is Behemoth, Amazon Rising, Power and Seduction in the Age of Amazon. And I believe we are all being seduced. You can buy it, of course, at Amazon and at other bookstores. If you go to my website at robingaster.com, there will be links to independent bookstores as well, because I don't think it should only be sold through Amazon. Yes, and you'll find some other stuff there too.
Professor Gaster, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, I'm glad. I hope this was a good interview for you.